Hi, and welcome to this webinar on how to pivot your sales strategy during this coronavirus situation. My name's Abbie White, and I'll be running through the presentation with you today. And thank you very much to Dietitian Connection for the opportunity to chat with you today. What I'm going to be going through is 7 keys to sales during the coronavirus situation, but also beyond coronavirus. All of these strategies are ones that I use on a day-to-day basis and have done for years. I've just tweaked them slightly to the current situation. I'm then going to be going through some of the priorities as I see it for us and our businesses at the moment, how to pivot your sales strategy and some examples. And I want to give you examples from all different industries so that hopefully that will give you some inspiration. And then finally, how to strengthen your execution. It's all well and good us feeling inspired and getting some great examples, but unless we execute upon those, then none of it's going to come to fruition and get results for our business. So I also really want to focus on how I can help you to execute during this time when a lot of us are feeling quite overwhelmed and there's quite a lot on our plates. So this is me in a nutshell. As I said, my name is Abbie White, and I've got 2 business babies, so to speak. The first is the Execution Zone, which is business education, and the second is Sales Redefined, which is sales consultancy and enablement. And as the name of the first business gives away, I'm super passionate and focused on all things execution and making sure that really we take action so that we can get results, and we sort of really bridge that barrier between strategy and execution. So my passions are, like I said, high performance sales and execution. And I come from a background of 15 years plus in sales, having worked as a small business owner myself, but also in a previous life in corporate for the likes of IBM and so on. And then I'm mum to a very energetic 18-month-old, which is currently super challenging, as I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. So I want to start just by acknowledging where we are and where we're at. I'm going to be going through lots of inspiration and ideas and so on. And I do that full well understanding and knowing that, we're probably all feeling slightly different day by day, even hour by hour. And, I'm very much in the same boat as you. My business has also been heavily impacted. I also have a son home from daycare. I also have days of feeling like, yep, I've got this, and other days not so much. So I just really want to acknowledge that we're all in this together and we're all in the same boat. And as a community with Dietitian Connection, I really believe this is a great opportunity for us to come together and support each other through this. So I wanted to share my favorite quote, which is, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And we're kind of full on in a severe thunderstorm, come monsoon, come tidal wave at the moment. And I think the opportunity for us is to somehow smile and dance our way through it, despite the fact that often isn't easy. And I want to give you some inspiration of how potentially, there can be that slither of a silver lining in this situation for you. So I want to start with, please don't stop selling. The biggest thing that I'm hearing at the moment that worries me and disturbs me, quite frankly, is, it's not appropriate to sell. We should all stop selling. Now, our loyal customers, our raving fans, our customers who've been coming to us potentially for years on end and love us to pieces, they don't want to see us go out of business. Our families don't want to see us go out of business, and we don't want to go out of business. So I truly believe that for everybody, for our families, our economy, our customers, everything, we and those people that we serve so loyally, we really do need to carry on and not stop selling. I purely think it's adapting how we sell to be sensitive to the situation and have empathy with those potential customers and customers that we serve and how they might have been impacted, but not stop selling altogether. Simply just adapt. So for me, this comes back to, what is your sales mindset? Despite the fact that your customers may now be in difficult times, they may have lost their jobs themselves, they may financially be in a difficult situation where they're not sure they can afford to engage your services, they may actually still have requirements that you are able to help, and that you're the one person helping them at this point in time with some challenges they might be facing. So I really want you on that note to consider what your sales mindset is, because I do believe that sales first and foremost comes down to mindset. And all the other things I'm going to talk to you about, in a way you could argue are regardless and aren't as important as mindset, because unless that's in place, the rest are irrelevant. So I want to share with you a quick example. I spoke a while back to a lady named Kate who was out of ACT, and she had just launched a membership option for her business. She was a nutritionist, and Kate wasn't selling into her membership. And part of that was a mindset challenge because she was concerned that, well, I don't want to come across as salesy. I'm a professional. I don't want to take advantage of the situation. I need to make sure that I remain to be seen as that professional and not as a salesperson. And long story short, I talked to Kate about what is it that you do for your clients? How is it that you serve them? Tell me a story of someone you've worked with and the results you got for them, typical results you achieve for your customers. Tell me about it. And she told me these amazing stories about how people had changed their lives, how they'd overcome various health challenges, how they had more energy to play with their kids, and all these amazing outcomes. And so that to me is what sales is about. It's not about selling. It's not about selling her membership. It's about the amazing results and outcomes she is able to deliver for her clients. I talked to Kate about that and asked her to save her favorite customer story. And beyond that, I said to Kate, look, if you don't have the conversation and offer people the opportunity to join your membership, just the opportunity, you're actually denying them the opportunity to get that same outcome and results that you just talked to me about. So don't do people a disservice and remove that from them. At least give them the option for them to consider, and they can make their own mind up whether they think it's the right fit or not. So I think you need to encourage yourself and your teams, if you have them, to bear that in mind about the great work that you do. And one of the best ways of doing this is to reconsider your favorite customer success story or journey, or perhaps it's a testimonial or a thank you email or card that somebody sent you, and put it on your desk. And every time you feel yourself not wanting to have a sales conversation, look at it and remind yourself, how do I get this outcome for more people? Because people still need us during this time. People still have health concerns and health challenges. And if anything, I think as we're all going into lockdown, we're all probably quite concerned about putting on weight and having even more unhealthy eating habits. We're probably going to need you even more right now. So I believe this is about considering how during this time, if we can, as Tony Robbins puts it, his words, ignore some of the prophets of doom, there can actually be some opportunities that come out of this situation. And I believe for the dietitian community, there are opportunities. I think a lot of us, as I just mentioned, are concerned about our eating habits. I think a few of us are going to come out of this situation a few kilos heavier, myself included. So I absolutely believe that the dietitian community need to be there to support us during this time, but also ready to rebuild and rebound out of this situation when we all come out of this. And so we need you to be strong and there for us at our side. And if we look at the history, whilst everyone is sort of saying, the buzzword at the moment is this is an unprecedented circumstance, crisis isn't unprecedented. There have been situations like this before. Not quite the same, but there has been crisis situations. And if you look at the global financial crisis as a point of reference, out of that time came Airbnb, Uber, WhatsApp, Pinterest, so many innovative businesses. And I think this right now is the time to innovate, and that's what we're going to continue to see. So I think the question is now, how do you innovate during this time to still serve your customers? So I want to leave you with that question just for a moment and consider, how can you think of your favorite customer success story that helps you to push past any reservations or procrastination you might have? And then how can you continue to go on and serve your customers? And we're going to talk to that a little bit more in a moment. The second priority, I believe, is leadership. And that's leadership for ourselves, for the community that we serve, for our teams that we may or may not have, and for our customers. I do believe that this is a time to step up. If we look at history again, there's a book that I love called Good to Great by Jim Collins. They looked through all these different companies, and the great companies, despite having challenging times, despite adverse market conditions, they still thrived and they were still great. And one of the few factors that boiled down to was what Jim determined as level 5 leaders. Those level 5 leaders were typically quite selfless. They were able to put the business before themselves, and they were able to confront the brutal facts and face the reality that was before them. However, they never lost faith. And I think that's what's being asked of all of us right now. I also think during this time, the most unusual people often step up. If you look at the bushfires not that long ago, I think people that stepped up as leaders in that time were Samantha Gash. She raised over $1 million by organising the relief run. And that was an incredible achievement in, I think it was only about 2 weeks that she did that. Celeste Barber, we all know the story all too well, raised over $50 million and really stepped up. And the one I'm now seeing at the moment during the coronavirus is a guy called Joe Wicks, who's a fellow Brit, who on the first day that the UK schools closed actually launched his YouTube live shows doing physical education, PE classes for school children. And in a week, he got over a million viewers added to his channel. And not only that, he raised over £80,000 in YouTube advertising fees. And he went on to donate that to the British healthcare system, the NHS. And he has now gone on to do amazing things even within the 1 or 2 weeks since he started doing that. So that's someone who in this time has really stepped up. And even here in Australia, I've got neighbours of mine who've been talking to me about Joe Wicks. He really has started to go global. And I think that's the kind of exciting aspect to this. We all have the ability to start a YouTube channel. Dietitian Connection have just done so. Fantastic example. And I think that it gives new and emerging leaders an opportunity to step up, and it can be any one of us. So when I was speaking about a week or two ago to Olivia Ruello, CEO of Business Chicks, she talked about this phrase that she'd been using with her team, which was, how do we want to be remembered during this crisis? And that was such a powerful statement. It really, slapped me in the face almost, for want of a better phrase. And it's really been something that I keep on drawing upon around going, how do I want to be remembered? I want to be remembered as the person that was honest and realistic, but also positive, and started helping try to bring my skill set to the table and inspiring people. So I invite you to ask yourself the same question around, how do you want to be remembered during this crisis? By your customers, by people who might follow you on socials, by your family, by your community? Because I think it's a big question that can inspire us to go on to do a little bit more at this challenging time. So I think for us, this, as I'm saying, is really an opportunity to lead and to step up. Point number 3 that I want to talk to is how we pivot. Now, this has become the most overused word in the situation, I know. However, it is still valid. Now, the reason I think it's valid is because those businesses that have pivoted, what they are doing so well is, firstly, they've stopped the downside. They are containing the situation and they're minimizing the downside and the impact to their business by taking very, very fast action. They're often cutting costs. They're often rejigging and pivoting their offering. They're finding new ways and new revenue streams and new ways to serve their customers. So they're minimizing the downside. But what they're also doing is finding the pockets of opportunities and the silver linings so that they can still actually grow and expand during this time. So minimize the downside, maximize the upside. And that's what I believe we all need to be looking to do. So the way that we do that, because you might be sitting there thinking, well, that's nice, Abbie, but that's a huge statement and a huge question, and it is. The way I believe we break that down into bite-sized chunks is we start by, what are the problems my target market are facing now? If I look at my business, the problems my customers as business owners are facing today versus what they were facing 6 weeks ago are completely and utterly different. Your customers will be doing the same. People cannot perhaps come and visit you for a one-to-one face-to-face consultation. They might not be able to go to the shops and access some of the foods as easily. They might not be able to access even some of their medications as easily. And so right now, they might even have several children at home and have less time to cook and do those things. All of our situations have slightly changed. So what are the problems that your target market are now facing? They might be on an even tighter budget where they want to work with you, but don't necessarily have the budget to do so. So how can they engage you on a limited budget? These are the questions I believe we need to ask ourselves. The second question to that is then, how can I help with this? So some of the challenges that are there, I don't believe are my skill set to solve. I don't have the capability right now to produce hand sanitizers or medical equipment or face masks or so on. That's not my skill set that I bring to the table. And so that's not necessarily how I can help in this situation. But I do have a skill set that I can use. So it's the same is true for you. How can you help with those problems? And then finally, and thirdly, what is a minimum viable product you can use to test your theory? What we want to do is, before you spend huge amounts of time, money, resources, effort on this concept, we want to test it. So perhaps you came up with an example of an online course. Perhaps that was an example. How could you put together just one module, test the appetite for it, or even a webinar? A simple webinar like this. Could you put together a webinar to test the appetite of people and your topic before you go and build the whole entire thing? Perhaps it's that you want to put in payment options like Afterpay or others such as that. Again, could you do that testing it with a handful of clients before you roll it out to everybody? What is the smallest way you can test your theory to make sure that it's right and you've got enough evidence from your customers that backs it up before doubling down and investing any more time, effort, resources into it? So always test. And then finally, once you've tested, execute with speed. I truly believe the businesses here that are doing well are the ones that are acting with speed. They're not waiting for things to be perfect. They're not procrastinating. They are absolutely having to just run with this. And I want to give you an example. One of our clients, a company called Urban Ritual, they do beautiful hand creams and hand soaps and candles and so on. For them, they did have the ability to pivot and to produce hand sanitizers. It wasn't a big pivot for them. They didn't offer the product, so it was still a pivot, but it wasn't as big as it would be for some others. Within 48 hours, they came out with their first hand sanitizer product. They came out with 100 units. So that was their ability to act with speed and to test. Those 100 units sold before they even got them on the website. So that was their minimum viable product. They saw that it worked and then they doubled down into it. They've now gone on to sell thousands, and I mean thousands, of these hand sanitizers. The other thing, coming back to my point, is they didn't wait for it to be perfect. What they did was they used packaging that they were able to get their hands on and they went for it. Now, the beautiful owner of Urban Ritual, who's a small Sydney based business, I know that they have great attention to detail around their beautiful products and packaging, and they pride themselves on it just being absolutely beautiful and stunning design and so on. They weren't able to do that in this situation. It still looks great, but it probably wasn't as perfect as they would have liked if they could have spent another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks on this. And so again, they've dropped that level of perfectionism to reach the demand that is being asked of them in this situation. So that's a brilliant example of what are my target market facing now? They don't necessarily want the candles, they want hand sanitizer. Can we help with that? Yes, absolutely. We have the ability for our team to do that. What's the minimum viable product? It's 100 units. How do we execute with speed? We drop some of the perfectionism around the packaging and some of those things we'd like to do. It's a brilliant example. Others that we've seen is gyms. Gyms have started live streaming their classes. Gyms have started doing online courses. So again, great examples where very, very quickly they've come out with new offerings so that they can still address people's needs, but in a different way. So have a think about how this applies to you and your world and your business. If you are thinking of things like online courses, check out tools such as Thinkific or Teachable, because we all know that telehealth is now going absolutely mad and there's an explosion there. And the silver lining for you in this situation is no longer are you geographically constrained to wherever you happen to live. You're actually now able to serve people across the whole of Australia and even globally for that matter. So by adopting some of the telehealth technologies that I know Dietitian Connection have been talking to, you can actually take your business global suddenly and really share your particular areas of expertise on a larger scale and level. So these are some of the sales pivots I've talked to already. A couple additional ones just to add in. We've seen doctors obviously starting to do consults virtually, and I think that's a fantastic example of a pivot. We're seeing physiotherapists and so on starting to come out with online courses and training videos. Professional speakers have suddenly gone from speaking face-to-face to delivering them via live webinars. Tesla, GE, and Ford have changed all of their manufacturing plants to produce medical equipment. Dyson has done the same. Dyson are producing ventilators. So again, overnight, these businesses have redeployed their staff and their capabilities into areas that can now help the target market and the greater economy and what we're actually needing right now. So consider how this applies to you. Number 4 is communication. I believe that this is our customer retention and our bounce back strategy. If we want our customers to stick with us, which we absolutely do, then as a sales strategy, we need to be proactively communicating to our customers, communicating how we can support them through the time, communicating any changes of service, communicating any new offerings, and making sure we stay engaged. A task that I did the other day was I went around all of our customers who we'd worked with for the past 12 months, and I sent them all a personal email just saying, hey, thinking of you, how are you doing? I'm here to support. Please reach out if I can do anything. I hope you and your family are safe. Really simple email, because what we want to do is we want to be seen as being the person who is there for people during this time, not just showing up afterwards. It's almost like the friend who turns up when they want something. Nobody likes that. We want to be seen to be there during this time. I want to give you another example of this. My bookkeeper, a lady named Kate, she, on the day that the government grants got announced for the stimulus packages, she did a personal 2 to 3 minute video and a bullet point email summary with, here's what you need to know, here's what you need to do, here's what the next steps are, and here's the actions. Really clearly and concisely summarizing, along with a personal video and message, sent that out to all of her customers. And that was incredible. Not only did she do that, she did it within about 3 hours of the announcements being made. So for me as a customer, I felt as if I absolutely want to stand by her during this time, because she's there standing by me. She's communicating proactively. I'm clear on what I need to know. She's absolutely being proactive, and she's by our side. And so that is making a difference. On the flip side, I've got a friend who has stepped away from her accountant during this time because she hasn't heard from her. So you need to make sure that your customers have heard from you during this time, even if it's just I'm just checking in to see how you're going during this time, even just those sorts of emails, or here's my 5 top tips for things that you can do to maintain your health and your diet during this time. You know, little things like that make all the difference. If you are launching new products and services, again, make sure you shout about it. A lot of the time, you might do a social media post or you might do an email post. If you look at average open rates on email, sometimes they can actually be as low as 20%. So you might have sent that email and perceived that all your customers heard about it and heard the updates in the news, but actually they might not have received it and open it. So you don't just have to communicate once. Sometimes it takes multiple times communicating for people to have received that message. So don't just stop at the once. I now want to move on to community. What is really interesting out of this time is how important community has now become. If you look at social media, Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives have gone up by 50% during this time. Some of the apps around Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, some of their usage has gone up by up to 70%. We are wanting to stay connected as a community. What I'm personally noticing is people are running back to Facebook groups that actually, I had a Facebook group that wasn't that active, and suddenly everyone's coming running back to it because we want to find ways to stay engaged with our community. So during this time, apologies, got a printer going off in the background. During this time, look for ways that with your community, you can stay engaged. Now, the first thing to consider is collaborations that you can bring to your community. So giving you an example, Style Runner, who do the activewear clothing, they've collaborated with various different influencers and sports people, I'm trying to think of the right term, but fitness enthusiasts, that essentially they can get to do a live yoga lesson or a live workout or live running tips that they can bring to their community. So by both of them bringing their community, their expertise and so on together, they have come up with an awesome collaboration. And actually what they're doing is it's a 3-way win. It's a win for Style Runner because they're adding more value to their audience. It's a win for that fitness person and that influencer potentially, because they are able to access a whole entire new audience and probably for free. And then finally, it's a win for the audience, for us, for those people who are following them on Instagram or whatever social media platform, because we're actually accessing free workouts and being able to stay fit. So some unusual collaborations actually start to emerge in this time. And I think that's what we should all be looking at. Who can we collaborate with and bring to our audience so that the sum of the two parts are actually greater? And I think this is a really interesting opportunity, because you might be able to access other people's databases, other people's social media audiences by coming together and doing things. Podcasts. I know that the lady who produces our podcast for us and does all the technical stuff, so to speak, she has seen a massive surge in people starting podcasts. That this could be the extra time that you have on your hands, and I say that loosely, knowing that a lot of us have got kids at home, to launch your podcast. I mentioned Facebook. A lot of us are flooding back to Facebook. Could you start or re-engage or build a Facebook group? Finally, YouTube. YouTube has seen a huge increase at this point in time. Dietitian Connection's a great example of this in terms of using this time to start a YouTube channel. Is that something that you can do? We had the Joe Wicks example. It's working really, really well. Video usage has gone through the roof. You could be looking at other platforms. If you're working with, for example, some professionals, some C-level execs, they might be more active on platforms like LinkedIn. Look at the platforms that are right for you and your audience. And then finally, think of other ways you can engage your community. Cancer Council have just started doing community teas. And I think that's great. Come together for a tea and a coffee online. A lot of us are doing virtual lunch and learns or virtual webinars. I know some companies are doing virtual drinks on a Friday night. So look at ways that you can bring together perhaps your customers for a virtual coffee or a tea or whatever that might be for you. Number 6, look at online sales funnels. This is one of the ones that I think is the most important at this point in time, because we might not be getting the referrals that we used to, because we might not be getting some of those traditional sales, so to speak, via traditional methods. A lot of us are having to move to online sales funnels, and I'll explain exactly what I mean by this. So a sales funnel is from taking someone cold, never heard of you before, don't know who you are, to a paying customer. So it's taking them right the way through from cold, getting to know you, building up the trust and credibility, and going through to buy with you. The way that I believe we do that is we build stepping stones. So we might, for example, put together a download or a checklist or a template. We might have something that we use already in our practice. You might have, for example, some sort of weekly planner or some sort of guide or a cheat sheet that you might be able to digitalize and put into a PDF. You might be able to use some of your resources and put it into a 1-hour free lunch and learn presentation. You might be able to record a video series, a 3-part video series. So it's basically building out stepping stones so that people can get to know you, trust you before they buy from you, because typically it now takes 15, even 20 touch points for someone to buy from us. And so we need to build that journey. So it might be a case of I download your PDF and your guide. It might be a case I go, oh, that's really interesting. I like them. I like their style. I want to know a bit more. I'm going to attend their webinar. Then I might attend the webinar and go, you know what? I've got even more questions. I want to do a free consult with them. And I book in for a free 15-minute consult. And so essentially it's a journey. It's your customer journey you're taking on. And you need to give people multiple stepping stones that go from really, really low commitment, i.e. I've downloaded a PDF, to higher commitment, i.e. I'm going to take the time to do a free online consult with you. And that commitment isn't just financial. It's also in terms of time, how much time I'm spending with you. So think about how you can use some of these types of stepping stones to build out your journey for people. When you do this, test them. I've had some downloads before that don't work and get no downloads whatsoever. However, I've changed the title, I've changed the picture, and suddenly it works. So don't forget to test them. And even if it doesn't work on the first or second time, don't assume it's not working. Make a couple tweaks, make a couple tests, and then go again. I once had a download where I had exactly the same download, exactly the same title, and one cover had me in a red top and one had me in a black top. And the red top worked better than the black top. No idea why, but it made a difference. So it can be simple tweaks like that. And like I said, the language around the guide or whatever it might be that can make all the difference. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to start just one of these and think about what you've already got that you could repurpose. Do you have a blog that you could make into an ebook? Do you have a template that you could digitalize? Do you have a presentation that you once gave somewhere that you could turn into a webinar? What have you got that you could just do a little bit of a spring clean of and repurpose that means you can get going just that little bit quicker and make it a little bit easier for you? And don't forget, going back to community, once you've got that ready, shout about it with your communities. Ask some of your people that you've done collaborations with in the past, hey, do you mind sharing this? Can you share it on your Facebook page? Can you share it with your email database? Do you mind sharing this with other people? Ask your customers, hey, can you guys share this with your friends? I'd really appreciate this. Anyone who benefit with this, please share. So that's where these sales strategies all fit together, because we can share these with people we're doing collaborations with. We can share them in our communities. It all works hand in hand. So summarizing the sales funnel, create those stepping stones that take people on a journey to get to know you, build up the trust and enough trust to buy. Sometimes that can take time. I know people who have been part of membership communities and it's taken them up to 2 years to get to know people. So don't assume people aren't interested. Statistically, 80% of sales take 5 follow-ups or more. And so actually it's creating those multiple touch points that's going to make sales work right now. And particularly at this point in time when we might need to build even more trust than we did before to spend our hard-earned cash, you've just got to continue to nurture people very respectfully and authentically through this journey, and make sure that the resources you're putting together are huge value. On that note, I never hold back. I never think on a webinar or a download, well, I don't want to give them too many gems because then they won't come to me and they won't engage my services. I actually think the opposite. I think the more value I can provide, firstly, at this point in time, the better, so that we all stick together and support each other. But secondly, the more value I provide you, the more you're going to think I'm credible, the more you're going to trust me, and the more you're therefore going to want to work with me, as opposed to holding back and me feeling like, I just don't really know if they're the right person for me to work with because I wasn't really sure. And so put your best foot forward. Don't hold back. People will still want to engage with you. And then, as I said, test, because often it can be the most simple tweak that makes the difference. It can even be, what time of day do you post on your social media, because perhaps you posted it when your target market, who might have been mums, were putting their kids to bed and they didn't see it. So make sure that you stick to it, and it will absolutely come good for you as you start to test it and build it out. Finally, number 7, and this is building upon point number 6, is make sure that you nurture. So as I mentioned, most of your target market will not be ready to buy right this second. And companies that nurture their leads make 50% more sales than those who don't. This is probably my hottest tip, as I mentioned before, because right now, if we just look for people who are ready to buy right this second, I think we're going to be dismissing a huge proportion of the market. We want people to feel like we've been there contributing, adding value to them this whole entire time. And then when they're ready, firstly, you're front of mind because you've stayed active and you've stayed front of mind. And secondly, you've been the person supporting them through it with all these different free resources. Like I said, nurture your database right the way through, from that starting point right the way through to fruition, because it can take 15 touch points or more before we feel like we can trust people to buy from them. And that's partially because everyone these days is an expert. And so we just really need to build that credibility and trust. Things like testimonials, case studies, customer examples, all of those can help speed this process up and build that trust. So my final point on this is never assume that people aren't interested. 9 times out of 10, it's not the case. 9 times out of 10, it's just that they're not ready. They're really busy right now. They're trying to homeschool their kids. They might have just lost their job and can't afford it. It might be a number of factors. So please don't assume that they're not interested. Just continue following up, but respectfully. If you've spoken to someone and you've agreed to check in a couple of weeks, make sure you put that note in your diary and continue to call them, and don't just dismiss it. Finally, I want to talk about how you go about executing this plan. I've given you a hell of a lot of ideas there, hopefully you're feeling inspired on some of these. And now I want to break this down so that you can actually execute it and get some results. Now, the first thing we need to do is really focus. Research on execution has shown that if you have any more than 2 to 3 goals, you will not achieve them. And the more goals we have, the less likely we are to achieve any at all, and it goes down to 0. So the most optimal is 2 to 3 goals. Right now, I'd say with some of the challenges that we're all having, it's probably more like 1 to 2 goals. So really make sure that you boil down your focus. The way I do this is by going, what's the fewest battles to win the war? How can I kill 2 birds with 1 stone? To give you an example, I do a lot of speaking. The reason I do a lot of speaking is, firstly, it's a great way for me to be able to educate. I believe that sales happens and you sell by educating. Secondly, it builds my credibility. It builds my profile. It typically provides us with some great leads and some opportunity. I also tend to get asked to speak more. So if I speak at an event, I tend to get asked by someone else to speak at their event. And so speaking leads to more speaking, if that makes sense. So if you look at that, I've just named off 5 or 6 things that speaking does for me. So therefore, when I'm focusing and I'm picking my 1 or 2 goals, one of mine is speaking, because it kills off so many other tasks for me and helps me to get ahead. So consider in your world what that is for you, because everyone's is going to be a little bit different here, but make sure that we focus. So I don't want you to take all of these 7 things that we've talked about. I want you to take the 1 or 2 that really stand out for you and speak to you right now in your business. Then finally, to get that consistent execution, we have to build momentum. It's no different than going to the gym for the first time, starting your new diet. Once you've got momentum after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, we start to build habits. And so that's what we need to do, but just in a sales environment. You guys probably know this so well from your profession, and it's just adopting that same skill set around habit and discipline and execution into a sales context. So for me and a lot of our clients, what works really well is 15 minutes of proactive sales a day. What I do is, even when I'm having the busiest of days, I still carve out those 15 minutes to do at least 1 proactive sales activity. By the end of the week, that means I've done 5 proactive things. By the end of the month, I've done 20. If you've got a team, that might mean you've done 40 or 60 proactive things. That is constantly going to make you feel like there's plenty more fish in the sea. It's constantly going to also give you the confidence. And I think that's really important for us, because when we don't have confidence, it shows up in our conversations. There's a subtle underlying, sometimes even just a feeling of, lack of confidence or desperation even, that sometimes shows through in our conversations. So if we keep the momentum up, confidence will build from there, and that will translate into results for us. So for me, it's about scheduling that 15 minutes a day in my diary. And the other one that we do a lot of is Follow-Up Friday. So on a Friday, we will follow up on any outstanding quotes, any outstanding inquiries, all those sorts of things. And so again, it just means that we are consistently executing. So that would be my recommendation to you to get started on your execution. The final piece of that is make sure that you take the first step. Right? I truly believe that execution is about taking the first step. Tony Robbins talks about this. Don't leave the scene of setting a goal until you've taken the first step towards its attainment. So if you can spare just 5 to 10 minutes now before you get back to your emails, get back to your day, get back to your children, just to do one thing. Maybe it's schedule the time in the diary. Maybe it's fire off a couple emails to people about collaborations. Maybe it's reactivate or even start a Facebook group. What's just one step you could do in 5 to 10 minutes to just feel like you've kick-started this? And I'll share a really, really quick personal story on this. I decided in January that I was going to start a podcast. And before I actually went off and did it, I thought, no, who's going to listen to it? Is it just going to be my mum, my dad, my husband, maybe my brother? Who am I to start a podcast? Everyone's going to think, who are you? And all those different thoughts crossed my mind. Now, before I left the scene of setting the goal, I pushed myself to send 3 emails to people who I thought would be fantastic podcast guests and would resonate with my audience. I got an email back from one of those people within an hour going, yep, I'd love to, I can do next week. So immediately I thought, okay, crap, I don't even know how to start a podcast, but I'd taken the first step. I was committed, I was accountable, it was out there, and I figured it out, and I had to do it. And I think right now, if we look at some of these tasks, such as start a podcast, start a YouTube channel, start a Facebook group, start an online course, they're all too big and daunting and overwhelming, and so they don't happen. And so break it down to just what is the smallest first step I could take towards this, and I promise you the rest will then follow. So my real challenge to you is to try and do that 5 to 10 minutes now. If you can't do it now, try and do it within the next 24 hours, because I know that then we have a stronger chance as a community of executing. So I want to wrap up with summarizing the different points we've talked to. Firstly, don't stop selling. Just purely adapt your sales conversation, have empathy to people's situations, and just adapt to whatever they might personally be going through and the challenges that might be there around how they can engage with you. And it might look a little bit different how it did before. This is an opportunity to step up and lead. There are new people emerging who I hadn't even heard of a week ago. And there's an opportunity that we all have. We all have a phone. We all have social media. We all have access to YouTube. You know, it could be any one of us. And it doesn't have to be on a grand global scale. Even if we simply serve our existing customers and we keep our customer base loyal to us and they're ready to be re-engaged as soon as this all blows over and finishes, that is an absolute win, because your business is going to bounce back twice as quick as to somebody who just completely let the ball drop and didn't engage with their loyal customers during this time. So this is an opportunity to step up and lead on whatever level that is for you. Pivot fast, take action. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Communicate with your customers. Let them know changes to service. Let them know about new offerings. Let them know about the Facebook group that you might have started or whatever that might be. And don't just communicate once, communicate multiple times. Think about the open rates on emails, like I said, or the rate at which we typically see things on social media. We might have missed it. So you might have to communicate things 2, 3, 4 times for people to see them. Build an online community is something that I really encourage you to do, on whether that's your social media platforms, YouTube, or so on. Find a place that you can bring your community together and get behind you. Look at how you can build your online sales funnel. Start with just one thing. Pick the most simplest thing where you have a resource that you can just tweak, adapt, and reutilize and do really quickly. Use a tool like Canva to make it look really beautiful. Canva is free, and create some stunning ebooks and resources that you can do. And then finally, make sure you nurture your customers. Not everyone's going to be ready to buy right now. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to buy in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months. Play the long-term game and have the patience that if you're the person that nurtures, you're going to be the person that supported them through this time. You're going to be the person that is at the forefront of their mind when they're ready to go. Thank you for listening to this webinar. If you do want to connect and you do want some more resources, then feel free to join our Facebook group, which I mentioned to you, which is the Execution Zone community. We also started a free resources membership with various different recordings from HR experts, legal experts, communication experts, PR, sales, several different experts. You can visit those by going to our website, theexecutionzone.com, and signing up to our free membership. If you've got a question that I didn't cover, please feel free to email me. I'm really, really happy to take questions. And then likewise, feel free to connect with us on our social channels on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Finally, feel free to check out that podcast and embrace some of our imperfect action of learning how to podcast and get going with that. I really want to thank you for taking the time to join, and thank Dietitian Connection for this opportunity. I hope that you guys can find just 1 or 2 things from this that you can execute on immediately that will be those first steps that you need to get going and find whatever the silver lining is for you and your business throughout this experience that we're all going through together. Thanks very much for your time, and please feel free to connect if you've got questions that you would like me to help you answer.